David Phelps has had the golden voice of gospel music for years. It's the kind that makes you feel cold and brings tears to your eyes. With a vocal range that could shake the heavens and a passion for faith-driven art, he became a household name in Christian music. But what if I told you that David Phelps is now facing a life sentence? No, this isn't about a courtroom drama. Let's take a step back and look at how he got here. David Phelps was born on October 21, 1969, in Tomball, Texas, a small town where faith and family were as important as Friday night football. He grew up in a home that valued education, discipline, and self-expression. His father, Gene, went from working in accounting and banking to teaching business and finance in Houston, and his mother, Mariella, spent years molding young minds as an English professor. He also has two older sisters, Cher Proctor and Carrie Lee. But it didn't take long for his own special gift to stand out. Music wasn't just a hobby, it was a calling. After graduating from Tomball High School in 1988, he followed his passion at Baylor University, where Joyce Farwell helped him improve his singing, and he led the Baylor Religious Hour Choir, which deepened both his skill and his connection to gospel music. By the time he graduated in 1992 with a degree in music and vocal performance, he was a master of music. His path seemed clear, but when he joined the Gaither Vocal Band in 1997, things really changed. From then on, his voice would not only be heard, it would leave a lasting mark on gospel music. From the moment Phelps stepped onto the stage with the Gaither Vocal Band, it was clear he wasn't just another talented singer, he was something special. His voice didn't just fill a room, it demanded attention. Every note had weight, not just in power, but in meaning. There was a richness to his tone and a rawness to his delivery that made every performance feel deeply personal. It wasn't just about his amazing vocal range, it was about the emotion behind every lyric. He had a way of making people feel like he was singing directly to them, as if he understood their struggles, joys, and faith on a personal level. While the Gaither Vocal Band gave him a chance to show off his amazing talent, Phelps's goals went beyond group harmony. His solo career took off. Albums like Freedom and Life is a Church showed how he could combine the richness of traditional gospel with modern influences to make something new that was still deeply rooted in faith. His performances were more than concerts, they were immersive experiences. Whether he was in a small church or a big concert hall, he had a way of drawing people in and making every song feel like a personal testimony. His music wasn't just about singing, it was about life. It wasn't just about praise, it was about reflection, struggle, and the deeply human experience of faith. But what really made Phelps stand out wasn't his voice or his artistry, it was his honesty. In a business where talent often overshadows personality, he stayed grounded. Fans weren't just drawn to his music, they were drawn to him. He never made himself seem bigger than life, even though he was very talented. Instead, he was approachable, humble, and genuinely passionate about his message. People believed him when he talked about faith as something lived and real. That connection, that ability to make music feel deeply personal, is what made David Phelps a truly one-of-a-kind artist. He may have been a gospel superstar, but at his core he was just a family man. No matter how bright the stage lights got, home was where his heart was. He often talked about how his faith kept him grounded, but his wife and kids gave him life. Beyond the music, Phelps's happiest times were spent with his family, laughing and enjoying the simple things that made life full. But behind the fame and success, there was another side to his story that most people never saw. To put things in perspective, Phelps had always been the type of artist who gave everything he had. Every song, performance, and moment on stage felt like a piece of his soul. For years, he worked hard to become a better person. His unwavering passion, energy, and ability to hit impossible notes and pour his heart into every lyric were what fans saw. What they didn't see was the exhaustion creeping in and the private battles he kept to himself. At first, it was easy to brush off as a little tiredness that came with touring and performing all the time, but over time it became harder to ignore. He started needing longer breaks and skipping rehearsals, which he had never done before. Off stage, he wasn't himself. Friends noticed that he was pulling away more, sitting with his head in his hands between sets and looking more than just tired. His voice, the instrument that made him famous, started showing cracks. Not in a way that most people would notice, but enough that he did. During practice, he'd pause, clear his throat, shake his head, and try again. He told himself it was just allergies or overuse, but deep down he knew something wasn't right. Concert dates quietly. Scheduled events were cancelled, social media posts slowed down, and his always positive interactions with fans started to fade. When asked, he'd smile and say he was just resting, nothing to worry about. But behind that smile was a secret he wasn't ready to share, and soon the world would find out. The secret came out at a private party with close friends, fans, and fellow musicians. What was supposed to be a quiet night of music and celebration turned into a moment that no one in the room would forget. David took the stage, greeted the crowd, and then instead of singing, he spoke. The room went silent, conversation stopped, and there was an uneasy stillness. Everyone could feel that something was wrong. Then he said it. He had been dealing with a serious health problem that wasn't just affecting his energy but also threatening the thing that had defined his life, his voice. There were immediate whispers, quiet gasps, and people trying to keep their cool. David Phelps, whose voice had seemed almost otherworldly and whose music had given so many people hope and inspiration, was standing in front of them admitting that he might not be able to do what he loved for much longer. But even in that heartbreaking moment, his strength never wavered. He spoke with the same conviction that had always defined him, making it clear that while this battle was real, it wasn't the end. Music had been his calling, but now he needed to take a step back and focus on. No matter what the future held, he was at peace with it. When he was done, there was no grand performance or triumphant final note. There was just a man standing on stage, honest, vulnerable, and resolute in his belief that his story wasn't over yet. As expected, the news of David Phelps's revelation spread quickly, reaching every part of the gospel music world and beyond. Fans who had followed his journey for years had a hard time processing what they had just heard from the voice they had turned to in their worst times. People on social media were filled with sadness as they shared prayers, memories, and messages of support, saying how his songs had helped them through hard times. Some people thought back to the first time they heard him sing, while others watched old performances over and over again, unable to believe that those powerful vocals would soon be gone. It wasn't just fans who responded, other gospel artists did too. Many musicians and people who weren't in the Christian music industry praised David Phelps, calling him one of the most talented voices of his generation. Many also talked about how he had affected everyone he met as a person, with his kindness, humility, and unwavering faith. It was clear that David Phelps was more than just an artist, he was an inspiration to many through his music and the way he lived his life. As the world dealt with the sad news of David's death, his once full schedule, which included tours, rehearsals, recordings, and interviews, was suddenly empty. Concerts that had been planned months in advance had to be cancelled, and fans were given their money back. Fans were disappointed, but understood. For a man who had spent decades on the road making worship come to life through song, taking a break felt like losing a part of himself. At first, the sudden change was hard to get used to. He was used to waking up in a different city ready for another performance. He used to plan his days around sound checks and set lists, but now he has time to think. He is in a place he hadn't been in years and has no plans to leave soon. If there was one thing that kept him steady during the uncertainty, it was his family. His wife and kids, who had always been his biggest fans, became his biggest source of support. They reassured him that even though music was a big part of his life, it wasn't the only thing that made him who he was. He was a husband, a father, and a man of faith before he was a singer. Now more than ever, he needed to focus on the things that really mattered. Even though he had always put his faith first, this situation made him rely on it in ways he hadn't before. He spent more time praying for guidance and trying to imagine what the future might hold. He knew he wasn't the first artist to go through this. To deal with something like this. Many musicians had to quit their craft because of health problems, but that didn't make it any easier. Behind the scenes, there was a lot of talk about what this meant for his career. Could he still record music if live performances weren't an option? Would he take on a new role, maybe writing songs for others, mentoring younger artists, or finding other ways to share his gift? There were so many questions, and no one knew the answers. Fans wanted to know if he would ever come back. Some held out hope that he would find his way back to the stage after resting and healing, while others were afraid that this could be the end of his singing career as they knew it. It was a painful thought. Gospel music without David Phelps seemed almost unimaginable. Despite the uncertainty, one thing never changed: his faith. In a letter to fans, he wrote about his journey and didn't dwell on the sadness. Instead, he focused on being thankful. He thanked his fans for being there for him, praying for him, and believing in him even during this tough time. He also reassured them that music would always be a part of him, no matter what happened next. It had never just been about performing, it was about the message, the connection, and the spirit behind it. The road ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain: David Phelps had already built a legacy that would last longer than any performance. His voice had moved people and his music had changed lives. No diagnosis, no challenge, could take away his impact on people's lives. Those who had been moved by his songs would carry that with them forever. For months, David Phelps had been out of the spotlight. His usual updates, which were full of personal reflections, behind-the-scenes moments, and words of encouragement, had stopped. Fans who had been following his every move for years were refreshing his pages looking for any sign of what was going on. At first, his fans were reassured that he was probably taking a well-deserved break after years of touring and recording non-stop. But as the weeks and months went by, concern grew. There were rumors in the comment sections and fan forums that he might be sick, and others wondered if he had decided to quietly stop making music altogether. Then, just when the uncertainty was too much to handle, a short and direct message showed up on his official pages. There were no specifics or explanations given, just an invitation that made everyone in the gospel music world eagerly wait. When the big day finally came, thousands of people watched with bated breath as the screen went from black to white. There he was, David Phelps, sitting in a softly lit studio, his face calm but carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. The months away had changed him, there was something different in the way he held himself and the way he took a moment to gather his thoughts before speaking. The energy that had always made him stand out on stage was less intense and had been replaced by something deeper and heavier. As he began to speak, it became clear how much he had been carrying. The last few months had been some of the hardest of his life. Behind closed doors, he had been fighting battles that no one had seen. Battles that had made him question everything he believed. Everything, even his future as a musician. He was more worn out than usual. Something more than just the regular tiredness that comes with years of doing this was. This was something different that really upset him. Fans listening from home could feel the weight of his words. It wasn't just a casual update, he was admitting that he was struggling and wasn't sure if he would ever return to the stage again. And then he said what everyone was waiting to hear: he wasn't ready to leave music, even though the journey had been hard and the road ahead was still uncertain. He talked about how things might be different in the future and how he would need to be more intentional about his health and his time. He talked about how his days of busy schedules, constant travel, and constant pressure might be behind him, but his love for music, for worship, and the people who had supported him for so long remained. As if to prove it, he reached for a microphone. There was silence for a moment, and then he started to sing. The first few notes were soft, almost tentative, as if he was testing the waters after being away for months. But then something changed. The power, emotion, and unmistakable richness of his voice filled the room in a way that made it clear: this wasn't just a performance, this was a statement. Fans watching from home were moved to tears, with some sitting in stunned silence to let the moment wash over them and others wiping away tears as they thought about how hard it had been for him to get to this point. Social media was filled with messages of support and people expressing their relief. People were thankful and happy to hear his voice again, but the road ahead was unclear. It was unclear whether this was the beginning of a new era or the end of an era. But one thing was for sure, David Phelps's voice, the force that had moved and inspired so many, had not gone away. His love of music, his unwavering faith, and the deep connection he had with his audience were still there. Even if the stage lights dimmed and the crowds fell silent, the legacy he had built through years of hard work and heartfelt. He would always be able to reach people who needed to hear it, in some way. His shows would never be forgotten.